Headphones on for best experience. In today's video we will explore Nisaba was a Mesopotamian goddess, the seed and the stylus. Nisaba and the birth of divine order, peace in the cradle of civilization. Sumer around 3200 BCE, when the land between the Tigris and Euphrates birthed agriculture, writing, and structured society. A divine feminine force emerged not from conquest or destruction, but through nourishment and knowledge. Her name was Nisaba, and she was not only the goddess of grain, but the sacred custodian of writing, accounting, and cosmic balance. Nisaba, also spelled Nidaba or Nanibgal, was one of the oldest deities in the Sumerian pantheon, attested in some of the earliest cuneiform tablets from the city of Eresh, where she held her principal cult. She was born to Enlil and Ninlil, divine lords of wind and grain, and from her inception she represented the ordered mind of heaven and earth, a deity through whom society would rise not through war, but wisdom. Her role as goddess of grain linked her directly to sustenance, fertility, and the control of natural abundance. But it was her elevation to the guardian of writing that forever sealed her legacy in Sumer's cultural structure. Nisaba was often depicted seated on a throne with a stylus and a clay tablet, overseeing the scribes, judges, and administrators who maintained the sacred records of kings, temples, and cosmos alike. Writing in ancient Mesopotamia was not merely a technical tool, it was divine power. Cuneiform, the earliest system of writing, emerged from temple administration needs, managing grain, livestock, and offerings. Nisaba's temples were the first scribal schools, and it was believed that all scribes worked under her spiritual guidance. Her temple at Eresh functioned as a religious and intellectual center, what modern scholars now view as the earliest known library and archive system. Kings did not rise in Sumer without first being sanctified through the scribal lens of Nisaba's priesthood. The measuring of land, the counting of harvests, the codifying of laws, all required her invisible hand. A king who ignored the goddess of order would fail to manage the fields or understand omens. Even Gudea of Lagash, c. 2144 to 2124 BCE, the celebrated ruler known for temple building, credited his success to divine instructions received through Nisaba's scribes. Keeper of the tablets, the rise of knowledge and kingship through Nisaba. As cities grew into empires, and as the Sumerians gave way to Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians, the role of Nisaba evolved but never vanished. She remained a silent architect of civilization's endurance. During the Old Babylonian period, Sun 1600 BCE, while Marduk and Ishtar gained political favor, Nisaba's image continued to be invoked in scribal ceremonies. Every new apprentice scribe began with prayers to Nisaba. Before touching a stylus, he whispered her name. In the Es-Sagila temple complex in Babylon, copies of earlier Sumerian texts, myths, law codes, star charts, and economic ledgers were preserved as sacred writings. Many of these bore dedications to Nisaba, a reminder that even the mighty gods of conquest required the consent of order. Without documentation, oaths were meaningless. Without records, temples crumbled. It was Nisaba who watched the archives. Among the Kassites and later Assyrians, Nisaba retained her connection to scholarship. As astronomical knowledge deepened in Mesopotamia, she was sometimes associated with celestial order. In this role, she became the embodiment of divine intelligence, a being through whom both the cycles of the stars and the cycles of agriculture were revealed. Even as the goddess Nabu, a male deity, rose in the later pantheon as god of writing, Nisaba remained entrenched in the foundations of scribal lore. In some texts, she was even called the teacher of Nabu. Her presence in incantations and temple dedications shows that though she was no longer politically dominant, her essence permeated the cultural DNA of Mesopotamia. Nisaba's greatness was not built on conquest but continuity. She structured kingship, empowered temple economy, and preserved ancient knowledge through clay and stylus. Her script outlived floods, wars, and dynastic collapse. The symbols she inspired, wedge-shaped impressions on clay, outlasted stone monuments. Her gift was eternal memory, final encouraging message of self-knowledge of the past. From the fertile plains of Sumer to the royal archives of Nineveh, Nisaba reminds us that true power lies not in brute strength, but in the stewardship of knowledge and sustenance. She forged greatness through order, not force, by aligning human ambition with the rhythms of nature and the permanence of record. Her legacy compels us today to return to what is sacred, the written word, the preserved truth, and the nourishment of body and mind. In a world saturated with noise and haste, the spirit of Nisaba calls us to slow down, inscribe with care, and remember that history, when well kept, becomes prophecy. By honoring her example, we reclaim our place as scribes of destiny and guardians of the seeds of wisdom. The seed and the stylus, Nisaba and the birth of divine order, the grain ledger and the temple code. In early Sumerian city-states such as Uruk, Lagash, and Eridu, grain was more than food, it was law. Every sheaf, every storage tally, every temple granary represented divine trust. Nisaba, the goddess of both grain and writing, stood at the center of this sacred transaction. Her scribes, stationed within ziggurats, controlled how grain was collected, distributed, and recorded. This was not bureaucracy. This was spiritual mathematics. Every bushel was accounted for. Every yield was offered in ceremony. The Temple of Eresh, her primary cult site, functioned as both storehouse and scribal academy. Clay tablets bearing her name, some 5,000 years old, still list detailed rations of barley and emmer wheat. These records reflect more than trade. They are the echoes of Nisaba's cosmic order. It was in these early tablets, etched in the proto-cuneiform script, that her dual role solidified, provider and record keeper. These tablets were not anonymous. They often began with invocations. In the name of Nisaba, Lady of Counting and Writing. Without her divine imprint, records were considered null. Her name was not symbolic. It was literal authority. As agriculture intensified, irrigation networks grew more sophisticated, and temple surplus management became essential to avoid famine. Here, Nisaba's temple scribes proved vital. They didn't just count grain, they calibrated the kingdom. Fields were measured in IQ units, harvests planned by sacred almanac, and festivals timed according to astral omens. The priest scribes who maintained these systems were known as dubsars, and every one of them was sworn to Nisaba's code. These priestly accountants often wore fringed robes, carried clay tablets in satchels, and bore styluses as sacred tools. In society, their status equaled that of warriors. Why? Because without them, empires would starve, temples would collapse, and the names of kings would be forgotten. Through Nisaba, scribes maintained both the pantry and the pantheon. The School of Tablets, birthplace of literacy. By 2500 BCE, education in Sumer had become institutionalized. The Aduba, or tablet house, was the world's first formal school system, and every Aduba invoked the blessings of Nisaba. Students, often sons of elites, were trained from early youth in counting systems, lexical lists, legal formulas, and hymns, all written in her name. The training was brutal. Clay tablets had to be shaped, smoothed, etched, and baked. Errors were not tolerated. Punishments for failure included beatings, confinement, and public shaming. Yet graduates of the Aduba rose to high office. They became temple treasurers, royal archivists, boundary inspectors, and astronomer priests. The very curriculum of the Aduba began with devotionals to Nisaba. O Nisaba, Lady of Wisdom, Queen of Tablets, may your stylus grant me memory eternal. Through her, literacy became the passport to power. And that power was not abstract. It gave rise to codified law, long-distance diplomacy, and divine kingship itself. From her temple in Eresh, Nisaba oversaw what we now call civilization's cognitive revolution. As a goddess, she transcended grain and glyph. She became the bridge between oral tradition and eternal record. Without Nisaba, there would be no code of Ur-Nammu, no hymns of Enheduanna, no transmission of ancient wisdom into the libraries of Ashurbanipal. Kindly click like, subscribe, and share this channel.